Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and disease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia and Andi Locke Mears discuss the history and foundations of the work of Dr. Hammer, what is now known as German New Medicine. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Andi, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you, Virginia.
You are a dream come true for me because I worked at a cancer clinic. It's a very unusual place. It's amazing. People come from all over the world. Yeah. It's almost a 50,000 square foot facility that has all kinds of integrative modalities that are really phenomenal. And it was there that I first came across the work of Dr. Hammer. And Dr. Lee Cowden, who's one of my mentors, really began to unwrap the framework of German New Medicine. Yeah. But it wasn't until I took your first course. I'm so excited for this call. I was trying to find another word, but there isn't another word. I'm so thankful and excited for this conversation. I want our listening audience to know you, to know about your program, and to know about the work of Dr. Hammer. So in that order, perhaps you can begin to share with us.
Yes, and gosh, how much time do we have? So how about if I start at the beginning of what this is? Because most people don't know what you call German New Medicine. We call it Germanische Heilkunde in German. And I don't speak German, but I at least can say those two words. So Germanische Heilkunde, Germanic New Medicine, was discovered over 40 years ago. Now, picture this. It's the late 70s, and a physician, Dr. Hammer, his wife was also a physician. They had 4 children. The youngest one was about 17, and he was on vacation in Italy, and he was accidentally shot. And you can imagine what that feels like to know that your child just got shot. So they rushed to his side, of course. They were with him in the hospital for 4 months. He was shot in August, and he died in Dr. Hammer's arms in December after dozens and dozens of operations, parts removed. And then he passed away. So it was pretty devastating, as you can imagine. A short time after that, he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. Now, this is not a mind, body, spirit guy. He's not going to what you and I might go to intuitively. He got some surgery. He got through that. He was actually given a 1% chance of living. He had other cancers as well. And he decided to look at the brain as the cause of disease. No one had ever done that. But there was that new invention called a CT scan. Now we're in the early 80s. And he was working at the University of Munich in their cancer area. And so he took CT scans of his patients, and he noticed in the CT, in the brain cranial CT, were these circles, like a targeted, almost like a dartboard, targeted ring formation. And he talked to them, talked with his patients. What's gone on in your life? And after talking to a number of them, he realized that he could start to correlate this information. And he realized that the people with the circle in, let's say, a location right here, they all had the same trauma, or what he calls a conflict shock, prior to their diagnosis. And they all had the same diagnosis. So he's talking with the men who had testicular cancer like him. They'd all experienced a profound loss, often a loss of a child. And this was 100%. There were no exceptions to this. So what he did was, that was amazing. And of course, he's like, oh my God, I think I've just discovered something. I need to tell the world. And so he had permission to do a postdoctoral thesis at the University of Tübingen in Germany, which is a very famous and ancient university. And so he mapped out the brain, and that's what you see behind me. We know where the Hammer focus is in all parts of the brain, and we know exactly what's going on and why. And so he compiled this information. He sent it to the university to approve so he could present his thesis, and they didn't allow him to present. And so he took them to court, and he won. And they still didn't allow him to present. He did that 4 times. He kept going to court. Let me present. The judge said yes, and they didn't let him. So
why?
This is big. Why, right? So they said to him, if your findings were 95% accurate, we would have let you present. But they weren't. They were 100% accurate. And they couldn't be the ones to then put a seal on, okay, allopathic medicine, we're wrong. We're on the wrong track here. So they systematically defamed him, imprisoned him over time, and suppressed his information. And that's been for 40 years. It still has existed on a grassroots throughout, and now, thankfully, it's made it to North America and to the English-speaking world. But as we know, they don't try to censor or defame things that are incorrect. They're fine with things that are wrong or things that are accurate part of the time. They don't like it when things are 100% accurate, which this is.
Well, the implications on an industrial complex is devastating.
Absolutely.
When he left Germany, he went to Spain. Is that correct?
He lived all over Europe, but yes, he was in Spain for quite a while, imprisoned twice, and finally exiled to Norway.
So he was imprisoned in Spain as well?
I think it was Spain and in France as well. I'd have to double check that, but he was imprisoned twice. And the second time they said, well, we'll let you go, but you have to renounce all the work that you've done and say it's not true. And he says, oh, I'm not going to do that. So he had to give up his medical license. They wanted to make sure he did not have the, quote, authority to be able to teach this or anything. He had full clinics in Germany before this got out, and he was healing a lot of people. And that was a threat.
Listening to you speak of this, it makes me think of much of the propaganda we're hearing in our own nation.
Correct. Yes.
And the character assassination we're hearing in our nation.
Absolutely.
About what we call laws of nature, self-evident truth that appeal to our natural affection.
Yeah.
And it's compelling because the confusion, chaos, and dis-ease that was generated around his work because the establishment would not endorse the merit of his work, although there was 100% scientific evidence to substantiate his work. In other words, don't believe what you see, believe what we're telling you.
Yeah.
Trust us.
Trust, yeah.
And it creates what people would call a divide, but it's not a divide. It's confusion, chaos, and dis-ease.
Intentional confusion.
And it doesn't divide us. It just makes us angry.
Yeah.
Whether we're on the side that's trying to defend what's not defensible,
Right.
or on the side that's saying, why are you censoring data, information, research? Unleash it for the world, the best practitioners in the world to research this.
Right.
So wherever there's any measure of censorship or withholding of information, the question is, why?
Yeah.
Why? Things that are false will die a natural death.
Right.
What I love about Dr. Hammer's story and what I found most compelling, to be frank with you, is that lies will die a natural death. Sadly, it comes at the cost of life.
Yeah.
And in our business, we try to minimize the lies that create confusion, chaos, and dis-ease.
Yep.
And that take life. Ultimately, they take life.
Yeah.
And when I think about what this man endured emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually,
All levels.
at all levels, that's another kind of war that's being fought, I think, in our country today.
Yeah.
in the political sphere, in the medical sphere, certainly in the mental health sphere. And I think it's imperative that we find strength and courage in his story so that we can rise and speak up and saying, why are we censoring information and disparaging somebody's character and using the rule of law to do it when universal principles are being advanced?
Yeah.
And that is life, liberty, love, law, right?
Right.
Why are you sabotaging that? And I think there's our answer.
There's our answer right there.
There's our answer. And it helps us align ourselves, if nothing more than with curiosity, to say, why is this side telling me don't believe what you see and what you hear and what you know? Believe what we're telling you.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just going to be really direct, because what ultimately destroyed Dr. Hamer's life, not his work, because it's a law, it exposed a law of nature, something that was self-evident, it was the truth. They couldn't destroy the truth, but they did destroy a man's life. And I guess I'm bringing this up because we're kind of being told the same thing. Don't believe what you see.
Yeah.
In this political cycle, it was a political establishment that ultimately allowed the destruction of this incredible man's life. And we're facing a similar challenge right now, regardless of what side of the fence you're on. We're being told, don't believe what you see. Don't believe what you hear. And don't believe how everything's affecting your pocketbook. Believe what we're telling you, that this person is horrible. And I think it's interesting how we, as humans, have to resort to destroying somebody's character and integrity and life's work to maintain power, right? Because that's what happened to Dr. Hamer.
That's kind of what they did to him. Yeah, exactly.
But I see that happening in almost every sphere, and certainly in the political sphere. We saw it on full display on Wednesday. Regardless of what side of the fence you're on, you can reason for yourself.
Right.
Something wasn't right there.
Yeah.
And I guess it's a law of nature that when the powers that be want more power, and when greed kicks in, they have to destroy, undermine, diminish truth. And I don't know, I found his story so gripping, and I'm so glad you laid it out for us like that, because we're at a similar precipice. How in the heck did we allow this to happen, right? So we got to speak up. So I appreciate you speaking up for the merit of his work, because it is the total truth. At the clinic, I didn't find one exception to Dr. Hamer's work.
Right.
Not one.
You're absolutely right, Virginia. So this work was verified, I think it was 39 times around Europe at that time, because he's trying to get the word out to physicians. He wanted to teach physicians, hey, what we learned in med school wasn't accurate. And here, let me present some cases to you, and you can see the merit of what I've discovered. He did that 39 times. So he would stand up in front of a group of his peers throughout Europe. They would hand him CT scans, and he would look at the CTs, and he would give the person's health history. Oh, well, when he was 12, he had a urinary tract infection. Oh, when he was 18, he had this. Oh, when he was 25, he had this. Oh, when he was 55, he had a myocardium heart attack. Oh, when he was, and that's what he did. And they, of course, knew the history of every one of the CTs. Well, he was 100% accurate. There was not one physician who could dispute anything he said. He was always accurate. You ask anyone who's in the healthcare field now, nothing is 100%. Does smoking cause cancer? No. It's lung cancer? No, it doesn't, because it doesn't.
Give us a few other examples.
Well, a big one here in America is toxins. And granted, they're not healthy for us for sure, but do they cause cancer? No, they don't. If you have some sort of chemical in your body, and we all have that chemical, then we should in theory, all have cancer, but we don't. So there's another factor. It can be contributing to your body being weaker, yes, but it is not contributing to a certain, why this person would have esophageal cancer and this person has stomach cancer. Well, those are two different cancers.
In that example, what in your findings, because I know you've studied all over the world, in that example, what would be the cause of one cancer over the other?
Esophageal cancer, we're looking at something that is difficult to swallow. It's, you're trying to get a morsel in, something that's in your life. You're trying to accept it into your life, swallow it into your beingness, if you will, versus your stomach. There's two parts to the stomach. I'm just giving partial. There's several parts to the esophagus as well. But for example, the larger curvature of the stomach would be a indigestible morsel conflict. It would be an anger conflict as well, something that you're just not able to digest. And because we're human, it can be metaphoric. For animals, it's literal. For that animal, it would be some food that they can't digest. But for us, it can be metaphoric.
Wow. You cited a remarkable piece of research that I'd forgotten about. I came across many, many years ago about an ecosystem that was established with rats. Is this a good time to interject this
Mice
to transition?
Heaven. The Mice Heaven thing. Is that the one?
Yes.
I did a whole podcast on that. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Is it appropriate to give people a little bridge beyond the work, or is that too big of a jump at this juncture?
It might be a little bit of a jump, but I mean, the principles are certainly Gemenische Heilkunde principles.
Basically, a perfect ecosystem was established.
Yeah, they put the mice in it, and they gave them, their burrows and things, and they thought, well, this is paradise. They have everything they need. They've got food, they've got water, they've got shelter. And then within a number of generations, they were all dead. Something like that.
Yes. In short order, they self-destructed.
Yeah.
So a universal principle would be, and this is why I wanted you to mention that briefly, is anytime man steps in and tries to act like God and creates anything artificial for the sake of research and even observing human behavior, and they try to confine and manipulate or even observe what transpires there, it's still an artificial system. That thing will die a natural death. And I think that research was vindicating to the work of Dr. Hammer.
Yeah.
Because he tried to tear down those barriers, not have those restrictions, and let the brains, the bodies, the central nervous systems, the stories, the people speak for themselves, and let that be the starting point of a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And
right.
If you don't want to take the story, just take the brain. The brain will tell you the story. Yeah. And you can verify it. Yeah. That's what I found fascinating about your work. I thought about that research, I thought it vindicated his work.
Yeah, it absolutely does. When I came across that study, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I have to do a podcast on this. So I did. Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Tell us your story. How did you come across his work?
My story. Yeah. I've been in the holistic health field for about 30 years and all kinds of certifications everywhere. And so I opened a wellness center in 2006 in Maine. And it was very successful, had a lot of traffic in and out, had other practitioners with me. And it was a great time. It was a very busy time. But I was helping people in, nutrition. I had a full herbal apothecary, did colon hydrotherapy, had a detoxing room, all the holistic health stuff, lots of cooking classes.
It's fun.
It's fun. Yeah, exactly. We had live blood microscopy. We had massage, all kinds of different things, fun things. And then in 2008, I started hearing this thing about German New Medicine. And I'd been in the field for quite a while at that point, literally, personally, since the 70s. So I'm like, I've never heard of this before. So I started to do some research, and I was very busy with my wellness center. And I thought, well, I'll just buy the book. And if I like it, if it makes sense to me, I'll share it with my clients. So I bought the book. And the book looks a lot more complicated than what's behind me, but it's the same thing, and with more information. It's very confusing. You don't know how to orient to it. And so for a year, I would look at that book and think, the intuition is like, go learn this, go learn this. And I'm like, but I've got the book right here. Let me see if I can figure it out again. And I couldn't. So I finally went up to Canada in 2009, early 2009. And in the first 30 minutes of that first workshop, I totally understood how to read the book. It was this key in the lock, and it turned. And that weekend totally changed my life. I came back on a Monday night, and Tuesday morning, I pulled the book out with my first client, and we read through it together. And because now it's like, okay, is this true? It's really too good to be true. I need proof. So I would read through it with the clients and see, is this accurate? And it was always accurate. And I really didn't understand it much. But as I got into it, I started to learn it more and more. When you work with clients with it, that's really how you learn it. I had a lot more advanced training in many countries. And so that was a very busy time, and it was a very exciting time just to start to incorporate this work. And as I did, I realized I didn't use all of my modalities the way I normally did. I no longer needed them. So it was an interesting observation. And eventually, 2012, I sold my wellness center, and I decided to devote all of my time to teaching Gemanische Heilkunde. So I began to set up classes. I was on an international team at the time, and so I would get clients from all over the world. And then around 2017, I thought, I'm going to really start to put this together. And I started to create courses, and what I have now is called the Beyond Holistic Medicine course, and that's the grandfather of my, or I should say the progeny of my very first courses that I had. And so I've been, very, very, very busy with all of that. I have 4 courses now that teach it. And so Beyond Holistic is my basic course. Everybody starts there. And then Advanced Beyond Holistic. And then the next one is Psychoses and Constellations. And I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. And then the last one is GHK for Professionals, for people who want to use this with clients. So before I go deeper there, I'd like to describe the 2-phase pattern, if that's okay to do it this way.
Yes, I think that would be an amazing practical segment. Can you give us an overview of the 2-phase pattern then? And then we'll elaborate on in the next segment.
The basis of Dr. Hammer's work, it's 5 biological laws that he discovered that are true for all living beings. The first biological law says that every disease starts with a conflict shock, a biological conflict shock. Now, what is a conflict shock? There has to be 3 criteria. One is that it's distressing. It's also isolative. So it's something you're focused on and you feel all by yourself. You're in that moment. In that 1 second, you're all by yourself. And the third one is that it's unexpected. Now, if you fulfill 1 or 2 of those criteria, it's what we'd call stress or emotional trauma. This is biological. All 3 criteria are met. We instantly have a circle in the brain, the lesion in the brain. That is connected to every part in our body. So we have many of those in our brain. And we turn a program on at that moment. So we're going about in our day, and suddenly our boss comes and tells us we've lost our job, and we were not expecting that at all. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've just lost my job. And again, the lesion has started, and you are now growing cells, or losing functioning somewhere in your body. You don't know where, but somewhere. Your body is now, your psyche brain organ system, which is part of your subconscious, is saying, we fit the 3 criteria. This is a survival issue. We need to adapt our organism here, our biology. We need to change it by turning on a specific program that will help with what's going on in that moment. What we know is we're conflict active. We're upset. my gosh, I've got to find another job. How will I pay the mortgage? How do I put food on the table? All those things that we would go through when we're stunned that we've just lost our job. So hopefully you get another job. Let's say 6 months later, you have another job. Well, you were just conflict active for 6 months. You were growing cells, or losing functioning for 6 months. You may not be aware of that at all. Occasionally there's pain in a couple of those programs. So you would know that, like a stomach ulcer would be in the conflict active phase. So 6 months later, you get another job. Phew, there's the relief. Now we're going to enter the second phase. The first phase was being conflict active. We're upset. We're literally running from a saber-toothed tiger. What we know is that we're growing cells, losing functioning somewhere. We get another job. Phew. Okay. We're okay now. We're all set. So we it's like the weight falls from your shoulders. You're okay now. At this point, your body switches from being sympathetic dominant, you're going, to being parasympathetic dominant. Now you can relax. And at this point, our body returns to homeostasis. If we grew cells for 6 months, we now need to break them down because we don't need them to create a larger organ. That's what it was doing, was creating more cells in an organ to help us cope with what happened. We can now break those cells down. There's pain, swelling, and inflammation when we do that. Or maybe we lost cells for 6 months. And now in the healing phase, the second phase, we're going to replenish those cells to, again, return to homeostasis. There's pain, swelling, and inflammation with that. This phase we're in right now is what we call being sick. So it means you've had a conflict shock, you've been conflict active, you've resolved it, and now you're going to return to normatonia, to health. And so the body knows exactly how to do that. If you lost functioning for 6 months, you will now regain it. So again, there's swelling with this, inflammation in the healing phase. And there's also edema in that circle in the brain. And there's also edema on the organ level. So imagine that you have a cut. Let's say you got a big cut. And your body is now going to start to heal that cut. And it's going to be red and inflamed and a little swollen. It's the same process. Our bodies know how to heal a cut. But we get very stupid when, oh my God, I found a lump. We think our bodies don't know what to do when they know exactly what to do. So once all that cells that need to be broken down have been broken down, or once all the cells that need to be replenished have been replenished, we can now get rid of the liquid in the circle in the brain and on the organ level. That's called an epicrisis, and it's the pushing out of the liquid. After that, we go into the final phase of the healing phase, where there's scarification in the brain, because we just kind of blew part of the brain up with edema, and then we pushed the edema out, and now we contracted it. So the connective tissue has weakened a little bit. So our glial cells will go in and start to kind of shore up that area, the connective tissue. And the liquid is also pushed out on the organ level as well. If you've ever had a fever, let's say you just don't feel good, you're drinking your chicken soup, you're resting, and then 3 nights later you wake up, it's like, oh, my fever broke in the night. That was your epicrisis. We've all felt that. We've all experienced that.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking about being in college and just pulling all-nighters all the time and the stress level. But once those exams were over, I would crash and burn.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go either lay in the sun and sleep as long as possible and often I got sick after.
That's right.
That's the cycle.
That's right. You were conflict active during the semester. And then when it's done, you go into the healing phase. Look at the number of people.
And the healing phase is when you're sick.
Right. Correct.
Which is upside down. People go to the doctors.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if every time we're sick, our population first went to, oh, I came out of the conflict stage and I'm sick. That's natural. My body's healing. Can you imagine what it would do to the medical community?
I can, yes. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the crisis is the body releasing, fully releasing.
Yeah, it's releasing the fluid. We don't need it anymore to protect that area in the brain or on the organ level, so we can get rid of it now.
Last example came up in class the other day about the mom. I think her little boy had blood in his urine.
Yeah.
And I immediately realized, oh, it's a loss of territory.
Yeah.
So that was his conflict active
Very
stage.
good.
Is that right?
Yes. Well, he was now in a healing phase, but yeah.
In a healing phase.
Yeah.
Was that a healing phase, the blood in the urine?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then sure enough, she began to ask him a few questions. Yeah. Loss of territory with some specific things around a team, I think, a sports team.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the body flushed it all out naturally.
Yeah. Well, the body knows exactly what to do. We just need to get out of its way.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So that's the two-phase pattern. You know, after that second phase of the healing phase and everything gets patched in, the connective tissue is shored up again, then we go back to our normal day-night rhythm. That's the two phases, and that's the cause of every single dis-ease out there.
Andi, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to Rest with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.